During a Senate hearing on global threats yesterday, U.S. intelligence chiefs warned about China. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines called China an unparalleled priority, and here's what FBI Director Christopher Wray had to say.
I don't think there is any country that presents a more severe threat to our innovation, our economic security, and our democratic ideas. And the tools in their toolbox to influence our businesses, our academic institutions, our governments at all levels are deep and wide and persistent. We're opening a new investigation in China every 10 hours, and I can assure the committee that's not because our folks don't have anything to do with their time.
And today it's the House's turn. The House Intelligence Committee will hold their worldwide threats hearing for the first time in more than 2 years. Intelligence agency leaders, including directors of the FBI, CIA, and NSA, will testify on the current security threats facing the United States and its allies. Joining us now, Chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. Also with us, the man who oversaw the security of the 2020 election, former director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Krebs. Good to have you both. Congressman Schiff, I think that the threat from China, that as it's been described, and the growing threat is definitely top priority there. How are you looking at addressing them?
You're right. It is an absolute top threat. We have been doing a deep dive on the China threat for the last couple of years and really concluded that the intelligence community needed to reorient its resources to address this very powerful competitor in every domain, in space, land, sea, in the cyber realm. And so one of the points of our hearing today is going to be to flesh out what are they doing to meet this threat, but also explore new threats. The pandemic, for example, was considered a soft threat. Well, that soft threat has killed over 500,000 Americans. And so we're going to be examining the way these threats have evolved and make sure the intelligence community is evolving with them.
Chairman Schiff, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. Can you be more specific on China? I think people understand that China broadly is a threat, and I know this is what you'll be picking through at the hearing today. But if you're an American sitting watching this show right now, what is the most immediate threat that China poses?
Well, probably what would strike people most in their living room right now is that China has one of the most capable cyber hacking and cyber espionage capabilities. So China may be in the process of stealing your private data. They may have already stolen your private data. If you're a business owner or business leader, they may have stolen your corporate trade secrets. They may be hacking into government agencies to steal defense plans. So this is, how China's actions influence people's lives every day. It's affecting our economic competitiveness. They don't need to do the same kind of research and development we do if they can simply steal it from our innovators. But also there are escalating tensions with Taiwan. There are crackdowns on peaceful protest in Hong Kong. There is militarization of the South China Sea. Any of these issues can become flashpoints of great concern to our country.
Chris, you look down the barrel of these threats in your job inside the government. How did you assess them at the time, and how different do you suspect they are right now in terms of China?
So I think the best characterization of the Chinese threat was posed by Rob Joyce, who's now the National Security Agency's Cybersecurity Directorate leader. And this was at a conference a couple years ago out in San Francisco. And he said, Russia is like a hurricane. China is like climate change. So Russia is much more disruptive in the current moment. But China is much more subtle, much more patient. It's almost a rope-a-dope. They kind of lull you to sleep. You don't see it. They use their soft power very effectively. And even at the local level, they influence politics, not just here in the halls of Washington, which they do, but also in our local communities. So they're much more deliberate, and they have a longer-term strategy as opposed to the Russians who are trying to make an impact today.
So, Chris, what does that mean when you say that China influences on a local level. So if I'm sitting in my town somewhere in America, China is putting its thumb on the scale somehow. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So they influence local races. If you think about some of the Confucius Institutes that have been established across our country at colleges and universities, it's an attempt to influence and say, hey, you know what? Hong Kong is part of China long term. It's not, and same goes for Taiwan. The Uyghur issue, not a big deal. This is us, demonstrating our own sovereignty. So they just try to shape the narrative locally to their benefit.
So the White House is expected to announce a new round of sanctions today against Russia in response to widespread hacking campaign efforts to interfere in the 2020 election. The sanctions include expelling Russian diplomats from the U.S. and blacklisting more than 20 Russian entities, according to one U.S. official and a second source familiar with the matter. Officials say Russia hacked U.S. tech company SolarWinds last year in what the president of Microsoft described as the largest and most sophisticated attack the world has ever seen. These sanctions come just days after a phone call between President Biden and Vladimir Putin. The two reportedly discussed a possible summit in the coming months and Russia's buildup of troops at the Ukraine border, which the U.S. has called deeply concerning. Chairman Schiff, obviously, we're still sifting through the wreckage of the SolarWinds hack. Are these sanctions appropriate right now?
They're absolutely appropriate. I think they send a powerful message that these kind of cyber hacks and cyber attacks are not going to be cost-free operations. They're going to hit the Russians right where it matters most in their economy and in the wealth of their oligarchs. So placing sanctions on their sovereign debt capabilities will have a real impact on the Russian economy. It will, I think, have a chilling impact as it's designed to. But we also need to push back hard on their election interference. That buildup of troops you mentioned along the border with Ukraine is deeply alarming. Of course, the last time we saw that kind of a troop buildup, it led to the disastrous occupation of portions of Ukraine, which the Russians continue to occupy. So I think the administration is handling it exactly as they should, providing a strong deterrent, but at the same time leaving the door open that where there are mutual interests, as in nuclear arms limitations, that we're going to look for opportunities to work together.
So, Chris, after the 2016 election and everything we know Russia did to influence the outcome there was obviously heightened awareness from people like you about our cybersecurity and keeping a closer eye on Russia. And then here comes the SolarWinds hack right in the middle of all that attention. How did that happen, and what is the lingering effect, the impact of the SolarWinds hack on what's happening with private companies and with the government here in America?
Well, one of the things that the sanction package includes is sanctions against Russian technology companies that have helped facilitate various cyber activity by the Russian SVR, the GRU, and the FSB, which are their cyber operators. And these are kind of flagship companies. Positive Technology specifically is a flagship technology company for Russia. And it shows the dual-use nature of these companies, not just facilitating cyber operations, but also it's going to have a limitation on the ability of those companies to operate in Europe. One of the things that I think that the sanction should effectively do is send a signal to Russia that says, in part, what we're trying to do here is we know you are in some networks still. We're hunting for you. We're going to look for you. We're going to root you out. But no further activity is acceptable. If you are in place, you should leave. And this should be a fairly solid shot across the bow. What I'm interested in, though, is how does Russia respond? Presumably, they'll kick out U.S. diplomats from Russia, but they also may escalate disinformation operations, may see some proxy nationalist operators launch some attacks against the U.S. So those are the things that if I'm a private sector organization right now, I'd be thinking about what my exposure is to some sort of Russian retaliation.
All right, Congressman Schiff, before we go, I know some see this as long overdue and others see this as extremely complicated, and both can be true at the same time. But your thoughts on the president's decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan?
It's the right decision. It's the right time, and it's not obviously risk-free. There is always the prospect that the Taliban might overrun the country, that al-Qaeda might reemerge. But at present, the terrorism threat is more significant in other parts of the country. The longer we stay, the more we put our own troops there at risk. And I think after 20 years, we have to reach the conclusion that our ability to continue to shape the Afghan government is very limited, and that's not going to change if we stay another 10 or 20 years. So difficult decision, and one that we make respectful of the sacrifice that so many Americans paid to keep us safe there, but the right decision.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.